For 30 years, the only thing investigators had was a bloodstain the size of a thumbprint. No weapon, no witness, no suspect, no name. Just a small oval of dried blood on the concrete floor of a storage unit in Hargrove County, Tennessee, collected in 1994, logged into evidence, and then quietly forgotten as the case went cold and the detective who worked it retired, and then died, and the file was moved to a box in a basement where it sat for 3 decades untouched. The victim was a woman named Cora Tillman. She was 29 years old, a kindergarten teacher. She disappeared on the morning of October 3, 1994 on her way to work. Her car was found abandoned at the edge of an industrial park 2 miles from the school. Her body was never recovered. The case was classified as a suspicious disappearance. It was never officially ruled a homicide, because without a body, the county DA at the time declined to pursue charges against anyone. There was no anyone. There was no suspect. There was nothing except that bloodstain and 30 years of silence. Until a forensic investigator named Dr. Alicia Morrow opened the evidence box in January 2024 and decided to run the sample through a technology that did not exist when Cora Tillman vanished. What happened next would not only identify the man responsible for Cora's disappearance, it would generate the most precise and accurate forensic reconstruction of a suspect's physical appearance ever produced from biological evidence alone. And it would do it from a sample so degraded, so old, so compromised by time and storage conditions, that most forensic labs would have written it off in under an hour. This is the story of what DNA phenotyping can do, and why nothing in criminal investigation will ever be the same. Cora Tillman was described by everyone who knew her as someone who made the ordinary feel significant. She remembered every child's name on the first day of school. She sent handwritten birthday cards to former students years after they had moved on. Her sister, Dana, told investigators that Cora had a habit of narrating her own life out loud, talking through her grocery list, describing the weather to her cat, announcing each step of her morning routine as if she were hosting a documentary about herself. She had no known enemies, no complicated relationships, no history of conflict. The only irregularity in the weeks before her disappearance was a detail her sister mentioned almost as an afterthought during the original 1994 investigation, that Cora had mentioned twice feeling like someone was watching her in the parking lot of the school. She had not reported it. She had not been alarmed enough. She had mentioned it the way you mention something that feels slightly off but not quite worth the trouble of making official. Investigators in 1994 had very little to work with. The storage unit where the blood was found was located in a facility with no surveillance cameras. The unit had been rented under a name that proved to be fictitious, paid in cash, no ID required, a practice that was entirely legal and entirely common at the time. The blood was collected, typed, it matched Cora's blood type, and submitted for what limited forensic analysis was available. Nothing returned a match. The case stalled within 8 months and was quietly shelved. Dana Tillman spent the next 30 years writing letters. To the Sheriff's Department. To the State Cold Case Unit. To 2 different attorneys general. To a true crime journalist who covered the case briefly in 2011 and then moved on. She never stopped. She never got a meaningful response. She became, in her own words, the world's most persistent unanswered question. In 2023, Tennessee expanded its cold case forensic review program to include cases with biological evidence predating the DNA era. Dr. Alicia Morrow was brought in as a consulting forensic geneticist. She was handed a list of 34 cases. Cora Tillman's was number 31. The blood sample arrived at Dr. Morrow's lab in a sealed evidence bag. It was mounted on a section of concrete that had been cut and preserved from the original storage unit floor. 30 years of thermal cycling, heating and cooling through thousands of seasonal changes, had degraded the DNA significantly. Under standard protocols, the sample would have been classified as insufficient for traditional DNA profiling. Dr. Morrow did not use standard protocols. She submitted the sample to a process called investigative genetic genealogy combined with forensic DNA phenotyping, 2 technologies that, used together, represent the most significant leap forward in cold case investigation since the introduction of DNA fingerprinting in the 1980s. Here is how it works. Traditional DNA profiling compares a known suspect's DNA to evidence DNA. It requires a suspect. It requires a match. Without either, it produces nothing. Investigative genetic genealogy does something entirely different. It extracts genetic data from the evidence sample and searches it against consumer genealogy databases, platforms where millions of people have voluntarily uploaded their own DNA for ancestry research. The algorithm does not look for an exact match. It looks for partial matches, relatives of the unknown subject, cousins, second cousins, distant family members who share portions of the same genetic sequence. From those partial matches, a family tree is constructed, branch by branch, generation by generation. The algorithm narrows the pool of potential candidates until it arrives at individuals who fit the geographic, temporal, and biological profile of the unknown subject. In Cora Tillman's case, the degraded sample returned 11 partial matches across 3 genealogy databases. The family tree reconstruction took 6 weeks. At the end of those 6 weeks, Dr. Morrow's team had identified a pool of 4 male candidates, all within the correct age range, all with documented presence in Hargrove County in 1994. Then came the phenotyping. Forensic DNA phenotyping reads the genetic markers within a DNA sample that are directly linked to physical appearance. Eye color, hair color, skin tone, face shape, the width of the jaw, the depth of the brow ridge, the likely distribution of facial hair. In 1994, this technology was science fiction. In 2024, it is a standard forensic tool used by law enforcement agencies in 14 countries. The algorithm processed Cora's evidence sample and generated a physical profile. Male, most likely between 35 and 50 years of age at time of collection, light brown to dark blonde hair, blue or gray eyes, fair to medium skin tone, broad jaw structure, above average height probability based on skeletal marker indicators within the sample. Dr. Morrow's team then cross-referenced the phenotyping output against the 4 family tree candidates. 3 were immediately eliminated. Their documented physical characteristics did not align with the generated profile. The 4th was a man named Gerald Pruitt. Gerald Pruitt had been 38 years old in October 1994. He had lived 11 miles from the storage unit. He had worked intermittently in the industrial park where Cora's car was found. He had no criminal record. He had never been interviewed in connection with Cora Tillman's disappearance. He had never appeared in any investigative file. He had, in 30 years, never come within a single degree of suspicion. He had died in 2019, 5 years before the investigation reached his name. Investigators obtained a DNA sample from his surviving son under a voluntary family assistance request. The comparison was run within 48 hours. The match probability returned at 99.97%. Gerald Pruitt was formally identified as the individual whose blood was present at the scene of Cora Tillman's disappearance. A retrospective investigation was immediately opened. Property records revealed he had rented a storage unit at the Hargrove facility under a variation of his middle name in 1993, 1 year before Cora vanished. Phone records from a landline registered to his employer showed 3 calls made to the school where Cora worked in the weeks preceding her disappearance. A former co-worker, located through social media and interviewed for the first time, recalled Pruitt mentioning a woman he had become fixated on, describing her as someone who noticed things, someone who would be difficult. Cora's body has not been found. Gerald Pruitt cannot be tried. The case remains officially open. But Dana Tillman finally has a name. In a statement released through the county sheriff's office, she said only this: she noticed things. He was right about that. She noticed him. She just didn't know yet that noticing him was enough to get her killed. Here is what I cannot stop sitting with. Gerald Pruitt lived for 25 years after Cora Tillman disappeared. He went to work. He had a son. He watched the world move on. He watched the investigation go nowhere. He watched the file go cold. He watched the detective retire. He watched time do exactly what he needed it to do, which was nothing. And for 25 years he was right to watch. Because the technology that would eventually find him did not exist yet. Forensic DNA phenotyping is not science fiction. It is not experimental. It is in active use right now in cold cases across the United States, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Australia. It has generated accurate facial reconstructions from samples as old as 166 years. It has identified suspects in cases where no other lead existed. It has given names to John Does who had been buried without identity for decades. And here is the part that I think matters most. Every person who has ever committed a crime and left biological evidence at a scene, no matter how long ago, no matter how degraded that evidence has become, is now operating under a different set of assumptions than the ones that protected Gerald Pruitt for 25 years. The clock on those cases is no longer running out. If anything, it is running in reverse. If you believe that time is no longer on the side of the person who thought they got away with it, subscribe. Because that is exactly the space this channel exists to explore. And tell me in the comments, do you think forensic DNA phenotyping should be admissible as standalone evidence in court? Or does the margin of error make it a tool for investigation only, not prosecution? I want to know where you land on this.